That brings me to the Bhagavad Gita. The ultimate guide for yoga. Because you have Patanjali, the Ashtanga Yoga, you have the Hatha Yoga practices that have become so common and so pervaded, and very rightly so. And I'm just so amazed at the way in which yogis in America and across the world outside of India have just taken to it, right? From the physical plane, that is an entry point for what yoga truly is. The practice of asanas. So what is the true practice of yoga? Lord Krishna is said to be the biggest, the biggest, strongest, and the most, like the seer for yoga. Right? Have you heard of that? Have you heard of him? Lord Krishna? No? And the Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita, it's the text that was written in the part of the Mahabharata. And Mahabharata is a book of life with all sorts of characters and human emotions and power plays and how things get manifested and how to navigate it all. It's one amazing epic that exists in India. What's the name? Mahabharata. And in that, there is a scene. There is a stage setting. The cream of the top, right? The cherry on the top. Not the cream, but the cherry on the top is this scene in the Bhagavad Gita. Where Arjuna is in battle with his cousins. So they're 5 siblings and they're fighting 100 other cousins of theirs over property and over land. And Krishna is on the side of the 5 siblings. And Arjuna is one amongst them. Arjuna is really depicted as a person who represents us. His questions, his delusive states, his aspirations, his internal strength, his abilities and skill sets. Everything represents us. And he and Krishna, Lord Krishna, they have a bond. Lord Krishna is considered, is the manifestation of Lord Vishnu, who runs the world. Okay? So that's the representation of the energy. And Krishna is guiding him. So he's on the battlefield. There are tens of thousands of chariots and horses. And he's like, I will not fight my cousins. Why do I have to fight over land? And why should I do it? These are my uncles. And Krishna tells him to fight, right? Why he has to fight. That it is for the justice of it all. That how he has to help to reinstate dharma. Okay? The goodness. And he has to put aside this cover, the cloud that he has. And in that, Krishna mentions that that you have to be Stithapragya. He mentions the word Stithapragya 2 or 3 times, right? In the starting of the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter. So, Arjuna says, who is Stithapragya? What do you mean by Stithapragya? So, Krishna says, the person who is established in his prajna. The prajna, the idea that we talked about, person who has his cognition in his hands. He is Stithapragya. And Stithapragya is the foundation of yoga. Okay? So what does this whole idea really say? So Krishna says, O Keshava, O Krishna, who is this person who is in steady wisdom? How does he walk? How does he talk? How does he move? How do I know that this person is established and Stithapragya, right? So Krishna says, one whose mind is not shaken by adversity, one who does not hanker after happiness, one who has become free from blind attachment, fear and anger, is indeed a person of steady wisdom. And the next one I really like, which is person who is not pleased at receiving something that he likes. He's not overjoyous and happy and he's not like a jumping monkey because he's received some candy, right? And he's person who is not vexed, who is not depressed just because he didn't get good candy. Person, so it's not that he's not going to get the candy, he will, right? But person who is not going to move and flutter because of what he receives. Right? And there's a sequence of almost 15 sutras in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Sometimes I recite them in the morning. Just help me come back. Okay. Stithapragnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava stitadhi kim prabhasheta kimasit vrajet kim prajahati yada kaman sarvan parthamanogatan atmanev atmanah tushta stithapragnastadochyate. It is someone who has given up his desires and is content with just his self. Just I am enough. Just his self. That's how he starts. And then he talks about it in great detail. In such a way, because Arjuna is like us. He will have questions, but how? Where? So Krishna addresses them in the sequence. So if you don't read the Bhagavad Gita, it's fine, but definitely read the Stithapragya, 17 sutras of the Stithapragya. Okay? The last 17. So in that...
Of the what? The Stithapragya?
Of Stithapragya, yes. Stitha is to be steady and Pragna is in wisdom. And then he says, so he's like, what do you do then? Can you just stand, just wait, right? But he's like, no. Imagine you standing on the shores of an ocean and the water is coming. It's touching you, it's going. It's touching you, it's going, right? That's how you stay. And then he talks about also another analogy of how to withdraw the limbs, to withdraw his senses a little bit inside, like how a turtle takes his limbs inside. And that is the 5th step of the Ashtanga Yoga, which is Pratyahara. Right? So all of those ideas are placed in just these 17 sutras with logic. Therefore, I love this dimension that Gita brings in. Because Gita is the book for the yoga of living. It is not a yoga class. It is the yoga of living. And everything is summarized in this. The rest of the 16 chapters of the Gita are just about how. Okay. Then Krishna takes him from karma yoga in terms of doing, how to act, karma yoga, to bhakti yoga, because you cannot just do with a lot of just cognition and rationality, but just surrender and worship makes life very easy. To give in and know that you are not all controlling, that there is something else. You don't have to wear that burden on you. Right? To be in that bhava of devotion. And what the devotion bhava does to you, and then he takes on to the jnana yoga. Okay. So yoga with the idea of prajna and PragyAparAdha, that's where Ayurveda and yoga truly meet, in my judgment. they're often called sister sciences. Right? Often called sister sciences.
Yoga and Ayurveda.
Yeah, often. But how? Yes, they all have the same mother in terms of the Eastern philosophy. Veda is the science and yoga is the practice. And therefore Ayurveda is not just herbs and panchakarma. It is that, but not just that. And yoga is not just yogasanas. You will just miss the boat if you don't discover this through your practice. And no, I'm not inducing any FOMO. I'm sure you're fine without it. I don't want to add one more fear on, but yeah. So there's a very interesting sutra in those sequences of how does PragyAparAdha actually occur. How does a person shift from Stithapragya? So he says, focusing on sense pleasures, including mental, even intellectual, people in ivory towers and academics, right? That's also a sense pleasure, okay? So focusing on sense pleasures, including mental, developing an attachment to that. And from that attachment, there is a passion that develops. When that passion is not fulfilled, there is anger. And when there is anger, when you're angry, you cannot see things the way they are. You're in a delusive state. Because of a delusion, you lose judgment. When you lose your judgment, pranashyati, you're destroyed. This is a classical sequence, occurs often. Sometimes it occurs so fast, we don't even know. Okay. But how do we create an awareness so that it doesn't occur? It is by self-checks as to why am I doing what am I doing? Is this worthwhile? Is this taking me closer to my goal and my aspirations in life? Is this energizing me? Who am I? What do I truly want? And at least everyone who is sitting here in this room, I feel, may be fortunate enough to be able to ask ourselves this question. A lot of humanity is not able to. Too much in a survival mode. Right? Well, we all are in our own ways, but still. So once we are okay with that, once you're content with that, then we will be able to open up our hearts and our minds to the idea of philanthropy. And that's not in terms of time or volunteering or just money, or it's just attitude, if nothing else. That will keep disease at bay. So with all of the external emotions and desires, you can be like this, being carried wherever the wind carries you, flying here and there, like, oh, I want to go there, where am I, From that, to be in this state where, it's your kite, you control where your kite goes, right? You want to control where your kite goes? So how does that happen? Through yoga. So through yoga. So